Here we are, folks, today to build a Seiko 36mm Datejust mod with a Wimbledon dial. The first thing you're going to want to do is unhook one side of your clasp so that you can get to the case back of the watch. Use your tool, whether that's a metal tool or the rubber ball tool like I have, to remove your case back and remove that water sealing gasket as well. Next, we're going to take out our movement and insert it into the movement holder. This is where we'll apply the dial. This dial sits with the date at 3 o'clock, so you want to break off the feet that do not correspond to 3 o'clock and leave the ones that do allow that dial to sit correctly. Be sure to file those burrs down so the dial sits nice and flush on the movement. Next, you want to wind your movement until the date rolls so that you know you're as close to midnight as possible before you begin setting your hands. Next, we're going to apply the hands to the movement. I like to use the plunge tool as it ensures that the pressure goes straight vertically up and down, but they do make hand tools for this process as well. I like to hold the hand with rotoco to ensure that I can get it nice and level to the movement. And then once you've got it sort of started on that pin, you can go ahead and remove your rotoco and drive the hand onto the movement with the hand setting tool. Next, I like to wind that hand to 6 o'clock. That way I can get the hands straight vertically up and down to one another and ensure that the hour and minute hands are aligned correctly. Next, we'll apply the minute hand. So once again, set your movement where it lines up to your hand tool. Line that up, holding the hand with rotoco in one hand and using your plunge tool to apply the hand with the other. I actually had a bit of a miss here and had to go and realign that minute hand. Be sure that your hands are aligned well. You can go in with this tool here and push those hands around with something that's got a nice flat base like that. And as long as you're gentle, it shouldn't damage your movement. Now that we've placed the minute and hour hands, we're going to ensure that they are lined up such that the date rolls as close to midnight as possible before applying the second hand in case we need to make any adjustments. I like to check hand alignment at 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 12 o'clock. If you notice that the hands are slightly misaligned, again, just push those around with something with a nice flat base like that pin tool that I have and ensure that they are lined up perfectly. Once aligning the hands, I'm going to check our date cycle. And we are right around midnight within just a couple of minutes. That's about as close as you can get on these NH35 movements from Seiko. Finally, we're going to set our seconds hand. I don't like to use the plunge tool for this. I like to use something with that flat base. So I'm actually going to use the same pin tool that I was using to align those hands and push them around. I'm using that nice flat base of that tool to attach the seconds hand to that pin there. Once you've applied your seconds hand, you can push your crown all the way in, and if the watch doesn't start ticking, begin to wind it and see if you can get it ticking. That will ensure that your hands are all applied in such a way that the watch will function, and then you can check and make sure that all the hands are aligned horizontally so that as the watch winds, they don't run into one another. Now that we've assembled the movement, dial, and hands, it's time to case up our movement. We're going to take our open case here with the case back removed. I like to take a tack cloth first and get in there and really clean out any dust and particles that may have settled in there. These can also be left in there from the watch shipping, so even if you leave it closed until right at the moment you're ready to set your movement in there, be sure to wipe it out really, really well. You can even use rotoco to get some of the solids that are being stubborn. And then I like to take my little puff tool and blow out any fine dust that may be left over with these air puffs here. Once you've removed all the particles and debris from your watch case, it's time to case your movement up. This case does fit this movement without any movement rings or adapters, so we're simply going to align the date to the magnifier and press the case straight down on the movement until it snaps into place. Once the movement is in, flip your watch over using that cushion to hold the movement in so that it doesn't shift, and roll the watch over where the rotor is now facing up. Next, we're going to take our crown stem, screw it into our crown, and measure the distance that we need to cut from that crown stem in order for the crown to be the proper distance from the case of the watch. The crown stem should be long enough so that the crown can be unscrewed, and you can hand wind the movement without the crown also screwing back down onto the crown barrel. You should also be able to pull the crown out into the two positions to set both the time and the date, and then push it back out of those positions into the winding position with no issue. So it's important here to get this measurement really precise and really right. I like to use these calipers to measure the distance from my crown to my case or my crown barrel, and then I like to freeze that measurement onto the calipers and mark exactly where that stem needs to be cut. I'll then take my snips, once I've marked it, and double check that marking to see exactly where I need to cut it so that I get just the right amount off that stem. When in doubt, leave a little extra because you can always go back and file some additionally down, or you can go back and even cut another thread or two off if it ends up too long. Be sure to file that edge down smooth before you thread the cut crown stem back into your crown. Once you've screwed the crown back onto your crown stem nice and snugly, we're going to ensure that we cut it to the correct length here. So we'll press the crown back into the movement. Sometimes you kind of have to rotate it a little bit and push, and rotate it a little bit and push to get that crown to seat in there correctly so that it takes. And then we'll ensure that the watch winds without threading back down onto that crown barrel. We'll push it down, make sure it threads all the way down with no gap or space in between the crown and the case when it's fully threaded down. And then that's how you know you cut that stem to the correct length, is when you can wind the watch and you're not threading it back down, but you can push the crown in and wind it all the way up and not have any additional excess space there between the crown and the case. Now that we've cut the crown to the correct length, we're ready to get our case back cleaned up. This is an exhibition sapphire case back, so we're going to make sure there's no dust or particulates in there. Get it cleaned up really well. Before we put that case back on, we do have to grease that O-ring to ensure proper seal so that this watch is water resistant. Most of these cases and builds are water resistant anywhere from 30 to 100 meters, and the O-ring in this case back is a big part of that. Once you've thoroughly greased your O-ring, take your tweezers. We're going to seat it into the little groove that O-ring sets in before we put our case back on. I like to gently go around with the tweezers and press this into that little crevice as you see. And now we're ready to put our case back on and finish our build. Ensure that the case back is on nice and tight once again to promote the water resistance that the case is rated for. We'll screw our crown back down after this. We'll reassemble our clasp, and then we'll put the watch on and size it and make sure everything works like it should. And here we are, a two-tone Wimbledon Datejust. This piece is 36 millimeters in diameter, so a really classic dressy men's size. If you like this watch or any other watch you see on my channel, please reach out at diamondstatemods@gmail.com. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.